Let's get to our topic, the signs of the times. Jesus himself actually used that phrase. So if he used it, then it must be important. And he uses it, first of all, in the context of the signs of his first coming. If you have your Bible, take it and turn to the Gospel of Matthew, the 16th chapter. And in that passage, Jesus is challenging the Pharisees, the scribes, the leaders of his day, who are asking him to do something, and he's not willing to do it. In Matthew, the 16th chapter, we read this: "The Pharisees, also with the Sadducees, came tempting him, desiring him that he would show them a sign from heaven." The word sign in the original Greek text, semeion, is a miraculous sign. In other words, Jesus, if you really are who people say you are, do a miracle. And if you'll do a miracle, then we'll believe in you. Now, maybe you've thought it sometime. Well, if I could see a real miracle, then I'd really believe in God. Not necessarily. There were a lot of people who saw Jesus' miracles and believed, but there were a lot of people who saw his miracles and did not believe. The miracle alone doesn't change you. The miracle alone doesn't convert you. The Spirit of God has to do that. You have to have a spiritual transformation where you're born again by the power of the Spirit of God in a faith relationship with the Lord, where you respond to the grace of God. You can be impressed by a miracle. You can be intellectually challenged by a miracle, but the miracle won't change you. And Jesus refused. He wouldn't do it. See, he did most of his miracles in Galilee to the north. He only did 2 in the city of Jerusalem. At the pool of Siloam, he healed a blind man. At the pool of Bethesda in Jerusalem, he healed a lame man. Now, there was a reason for that, because way back in the Old Testament, when David was trying to conquer the city of Jerusalem, which was held by the Jebusites, a Canaanite tribe, they taunted him and said, "Even the blind and the lame could keep you out of here." So David looked at them and said, "Then I'll remove the blind and the lame from Jerusalem." Jesus comes 1,000 years later as the greater son of David, the Messiah, and he removes the blind and the lame, not by an act of war, but by a miraculous healing. Those 2 miracles done in Jerusalem were done for a specific reason and a specific purpose, but these guys weren't there. They didn't see it. "We've heard about your other miracles. Do one for us." Verse 2. He answered and said, "When it's evening, you say it'll be fair weather today because the sky is red. There's a clear sunset. But in the morning, you say it'll be foul weather today because the sky is red and lowering or cloudy. Oh, you hypocrites, you can discern the face of the sky, but you cannot discern," and there's our phrase, "the signs of the times." You can guess the weather. You know the old farmer adage, red at night, farmer's delight, red in the morning, farmers take warning, or sailors, or however you once heard that. Jesus was saying, you guys can look at the sky and try to predict what's going to happen, but you cannot look at the signs of the times and get it. Jack mentioned in his message 109 prophecies of the first coming of Christ. Born of a virgin, born in Bethlehem, flees from Egypt, rides into town on a donkey, is betrayed for 30 pieces of silver, etc. Over 100 prophecies, and every one of them literally came true. And Jesus was saying to the spiritual leaders of his day, you missed it. You don't get it. You've missed the signs of the first coming. So I'm not going to do a miracle for you. I'm going to leave you with this thought. Verse 4. A wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign. There will not be any sign given to it, but the sign of the prophet Jonah, and he left and departed. Now, what in the world did he mean by that? Well, Jonah was that Old Testament prophet, remember, that ran away from God, ended up in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. later got spit up on the shore and said, yeah, I could change my mind. Whatever, I could give this a try. Yeah, I could go to Iraq. Okay. What he meant was, if the sign of my resurrection does not ultimately convince you that I really am the Messiah, the Son of God, no other miracle will. Stones to bread, feed a crowd of people with a few loaves and a few fishes or whatever, that's not going to change you. If the resurrection from the dead doesn't change you, nothing will. I'm leaving you to anticipate the sign of the prophet Jonah, and he walked away. And they missed it. They were that close to the Son of God. Think of it. Face to face with Jesus, and they didn't get it. They didn't understand who he was. They didn't catch the claim. They were so hung up on the idea that God would not come in human flesh that they would not respond to it. And yet the God of the Old Testament constantly came down and made appearances to people. In the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve sinned, and they ran and hid in the trees, God did not sit up in heaven and say, all right, you did it. Get on up here. No, God came down into the garden, down to the fallen place, walked into that dark place, simply calling like a parent, Adam, earthman, dirtball, where are you? We're over here in the trees. Why? What have you done? And with all the male leadership Adam could muster, what did he say? The woman you gave me. That was a great answer. Blame God and blame Eve. Eve, what have you done? The serpent made me do it. Blame the devil. Times change. Culture changes. Human nature never changes. When people mess up, they blame God, they blame the devil, or they blame each other. We're still living with the same fallen condition. But God came down visibly. When the children of Israel were in bondage in Egypt, crying out to God for deliverance, God came down to the burning bush. In the story in Exodus 3, where the bush is on fire and it is not consumed, and Moses is attracted to the bush, God speaks to him from the bush. And in one passage, you have the term God, Lord, all capital letters, Yahweh, Jehovah, and angel of the Lord, proving that the angel of the Lord is indeed God himself. If it's not God the Father, John said nobody at any time has seen God the Father, John 1. Then it's God the Son that appears in the bush. It's God the Son that speaks to him. And what does he say to him? I have heard the cries of my children in Egypt. I have seen their misery. God is not an impersonal force in the Old Testament. God is a personal being who hears and sees and cares.